Well, hello everyone. Welcome to episode 7 of Gens Before Friends.
Woo woo.
Woo!
Yeah.
Here with Queen AMG
Hello.
and Morbid Plum,
Hi.
and I'm Mockingbird. And today we are going to be covering the lore for the Knight and Vittorio. We are doing them together because their lore is intertwined together. Like many of the later chapters, the killer and survivor are connected somehow. And that's very much the case with the Knight and Vittorio. So, are y'all excited to learn about the
I am
Knight?
so excited to learn about Daddy Vittorio.
Yes.
I mean the night. Yay.
Like if we have to?
I'm here for Vittorio.
Yeah.
Same.
Well, unfortunately, we have to kind of cover the Knight because,
It's okay.
the Knight caused
hmm
a lot of stuff for Vittorio. So this is how I want to kind of break it down because we have the base lore for both the Knight and Vittorio, and then we also had tome 14 was their tome, so we have additional memories for the Knight and for Vittorio. And originally I was going to try to combine the Knight's tome lore with the base lore, but it was really not working out. So, and I also think it would be good to compare his base lore with the tome lore and see some of the differences that are there with the Knights, because the Knight's home lore is actually kind of expanding on his base lore. So we will cover the Knight's base lore first. Okay. We're going to do Knight and then we'll do Vittorio.
Sounds good.
Yay. So the Knight, his name is Tarhos Kovacs. And we start when he's a child, and there's this battle in his village. He lives in Hungary. They're screaming and fighting outside his home. And his mother is forcing him to drink this black fluid. He thinks it's medicine. And then he collapses. He doesn't remember anything until he wakes up and he is under all these bodies. And he hears the village burning. He's having to climb out of this mass of bodies, and he looks around at the destruction of his home, of his village, and then he hears this high-pitched whine in his ears, and his skin starts to prickle, like he's getting goosebumps. And he realizes he's in the presence of something he doesn't understand. And he can't articulate it at all. He doesn't know what it is. He knows it's not pain or grief or fear, kind of those normal emotions you would have looking at this destruction. He describes it as awe. And as he's thinking about how he's feeling in this moment, he doesn't notice that these men come up behind him and they take him. He doesn't even react. They put him in a cage with all the other slaves. But he is just still mesmerized by this presence he found at the destruction of his home. And so they take him away to Italy. And then from then on, he belongs to the Guardia Campania. And there is where he trains to be a knight. He learns how to wield weapons and forge his own armor. And he learns the code of chivalry, which is the code that knights had to obey their lords. In Tarhos's case, in the Guardia Campania, they were mercenary knights, so they were hired by other people, by different lords, so they didn't have just one lord that they obeyed. And as the years passed, he grew, he became more skilled, but he also made some friends within the Guardia Campania. Yeah, he had some friends. He calls them his faithful three, or his pack. So we have Alejandro Santiago. He was the apprentice for the armorer. We have Durko's Malaket, and he showed skill with stealth and silent kills. And then Sander Raltz, and he matched Tarhos in size and strength, and he liked to wield a huge battle axe. And so Tarhos with the Guardia Campania, they carried out many missions. Tarhos is very successful in the campaigns he was on, obviously killing. He's very skilled, but he never got to that feeling that he had back when he was a boy when his village was destroyed. But his bravery working with the Guardia Campania earned him knighthood and his freedom. So he was no longer a slave. He was free. And from then on, he had decided he is done taking orders from other people. He's going to set up on his own and be his own boss. But he also wanted to free his friends, his faithful three. So he needs to raise money so that he can buy their freedom. So he finds employment with a certain wealthy Italian lord, Vittorio Toscano, who was the Duke of Portoscuro. Vittorio was a scholar, and he was a collector of ancient knowledge and artifacts. And Vittorio was wanting to go on this expedition to find this stone called the Lapis Paradisus. And Vittorio believed that it held secrets that would open a gateway into a perfect world with no evil, perfect paradise, right? And so they went on this expedition, traveled around, and they ended up in Spain, and then which led them to the catacombs beneath the Portuguese city of Sintra. Now, the citizens of Sintra thought the catacombs were sacred, so it was guarded. And of course, Taros would have been fine just killing them all, right? But Vittorio, as we'll learn in his lore, is not about violence. And he tells Tarhos he needs to find another way in. And so Vittorio rides back to camp and leaves Tarhos there. And Tarhos goes against Vittorio. And he goes through and kills the guards and gets the stone. Then he returns to Portoscuro and he imprisons Vittorio in his own dungeon. And he wants to know what the meaning behind the symbols are. And so he imprisons Vittorio, but Vittorio refuses to tell him anything. So Tarhos begins torturing Vittorio's friends, his family. He displays their bodies on the street. So very horrific stuff. But Vittorio never wavers, and he never tells Tarhos anything about the symbols. So then Tarhos decides to use Vittorio's wealth to raise a small army, and with that army, in a few months, they are able to take on the Guardia Campania and take them out and free his friends. And so now he has his friends back with him. But also with all this going on, Tarhos is also becoming a threat, and the neighboring lords believe that Tarhos is the embodiment of evil. So they're all So they're all getting together their troops, their armies to take on Tarhos and Portoscuro. But Tarhos ignores them. He's not worried about it. He thinks these lords are cowardly, and they just kind of hide behind their laws and their codes, and so he has no respect for them. So, but they are coming to attack. So Tarhos heads to the dungeon to kill Vittorio. He does want the information for Vittorio about the Lapis Paradisus, but he doesn't want anyone else to get that knowledge either. So he will kill Vittorio rather than him be in the hands of one of the other lords. But when he gets down there, the dungeon is empty.
Daddy Vittorio escaped.
Yeah. He is gone. Vittorio is no longer in the dungeon. Doesn't make sense how. Door's still locked. It's not like he escaped. But as Tarhos is upset about this, it says he let out a roar. He's very frustrated. But then he starts to hear the battle going on outside. Those neighboring lords, their armies are coming in and attacking. And it also mentions that these quote unquote moral lords were raining down boulders and tree trunks on the town, crushing villagers that were still living there. So basically painting the other lords in not a great light. They were also killing innocent people. But in the chaos, Tarhos finds his faithful three. They're fighting back to back. They're cutting all the other people, all the troops down. Some people believed there was something supernatural going on with them as they were crushing everyone. But as they're fighting, Tarhos, he doesn't notice there's a strange fog rising from the fallen corpses. And he doesn't really notice until it's like covering. You can't even see 2 inches in front of him. And so Tarhos starts stumbling around in the fog. It reminds him of the liquid his mother forced him to drink as a boy. Can't find his way through the fog. He's calling out for his friends. But suddenly the fog dissipates and reveals a wasteland of bodies, of burning villages, structures falling, and he stares in awe. He hears that high-pitched whine that he heard as a boy. He starts to get those goosebumps again. He's transfixed on what he sees before him, because this is what he's been searching for, is that feeling he had when he was a boy, when his village was destroyed. And now he's found it again. He has found his paradise. And that is the Knight's base lore.
Cool.
Any thoughts?
Anytime you were talking about him and his friends, all I could think about was, let me tell you about my best friends. Yeah. I mean, he obviously,
Musketeers, maybe.
Yeah, he obviously had some humanity if he bought his friends out of, bought them or freed them.
He freed them. He slaughtered the Guardia Campania. So basically he like killed
the company that he used to work for.
And I don't know if he killed all of the company. I get the impression, because it says like his followers, and it does mention also like he had other followers, but like he had his main 3, so he probably took back more than just his friends, like anyone that would follow him. But I imagine like all the, I don't know how to put it, like the higher ups he probably took out, because they were not going to follow him, obviously. So, but yeah, he basically kills them all to free his friends. Love there, right?
Right.
That's true brotherhood. Friendship.
So basically, he was searching all his life for the awe he felt for destruction.
It talks about the dark presence, which could be the entity, maybe.
True.
This one way you can maybe, because it says, and I'm quoting from the lore, the presence of something he couldn't possibly understand.
Well, yeah, especially as a kid processing. Interesting.
So, but actually some of that is expanded. So,
ooh, okay.
We have the tome lore. The tome lore it doesn't all flow together. So we're gonna kind of go memory by memory, and some of it towards the end will kind of flow together once we get to the Vittorio stuff. But his tome is very different than the other tomes, because typically the tome lore is like, it is different memories, but it's like an expansion of like a particular moment or event in that character's life. So it's like one event, but it's like multiple memories about the one event. But the Knights is like all these memories that just kind of expand on his base lore. It's not just one event. So let's start with the first memory. And this first memory is an expansion of the attack on his village. And it talks about, of course, there's the sounds of battle outside. The warriors on horseback, hear the axes and the swords clanging. His father is fighting outside. And his mother is preparing something on the table. And Tarhos is watching his mom. And she is not panicked at all. She's very calm. She's very determined as she makes this black elixir. And she says this elixir is going to help them sleep through the battle.
Oh.
And Tarhos describes her as their strength and his strength. And that he's never seen her in this way. But he feels safe even with everything going on outside, because she is so calm and collected. So his mom hands his brothers and his sister cups of the elixir, and she turns to Tarhos and reassures him, and she helps him drink the elixir and tells him everything's going to be fine. The elixir is bitter and thick. And then he starts to feel this numbness spread, right? Everything's starting to get blurry, sounds fading, and inky blackness spreads over his eyes, and he falls asleep in his mother's embrace. And then it's all quiet. But he wakes up, and he is under all the bodies. He sees slashed throats, sightless eyes open staring at him. He hears children crying and knights laughing. And so he's looking at the faces surrounding him. He's trying to get out of these bodies. And as he's doing that, he actually comes across his uncle, whose eyes are open wide and scared. His mouth is in a death scream. And Tarhos knows he should be scared. He should feel sad, right? He's seeing his uncle dead, but he doesn't. He doesn't feel sadness or guilt or fear. And he doesn't understand why. But he just looks at all the devastation around him without flinching. And then suddenly a hand grips him and pulls him out of the pit of bodies. And he's carried away from his village with the high-pitched whine in his ears. And that's the first memory.
Which is very different than the
This is the one I think, I think this is the one that's very different. Because in the base lore, mom is forcing the liquid down his throat.
Yeah.
And this
dad, It mentions his dad. It mentions his siblings. It also doesn't sound like, because in the original base lore, when he crawls out of the bodies, you feel like he has this moment to like take everything in. And this is saying someone actually pulled him out of the bodies.
Yeah, you don't get there's not as much long of a pause like between him like getting out of the bodies and like taking in the surroundings and having feeling the presence and the feeling of awe. Like it's mentioned, but it's definitely more rushed at the end. This is definitely more about, I feel like, the mom. And her attitude is very different from the base lore.
Yeah. It could also just mean that Tarhos is a very unreliable narrator.
Yeah.
Too. When it comes to storytelling. So that could be part of it as well. He sounds like he'd be an unreliable narrator.
Well, we're going to get a lot more of his thoughts. A lot of this tome later on is his thoughts, more than like actual events, but we're getting to that. So next memory is when Tarhos is actually traveling with Vittorio. They're traveling on horseback looking for the Lapis Paradisus. They're going through Portugal, and they're looking for the catacombs beneath the city of Sintra. And he talks about how Vittorio claims he isn't in it for the riches, but he's hoping that this stone will lead them to another world of like paradise. No evil, no violence, right? But Tarhos doesn't believe any of this. As being a knight, he's seen the violence. Everything has been violence his whole life, right? From his village burning down to becoming a knight, working for the Guardia Campania. So he believes that the plague in the world is that the unnatural codes and laws that are created by the nobles and the lords. So basically your code of chivalry, that these codes are just kind of hiding the truth of the world and that there is violence in the world, right? And while he doesn't fully understand everything going on in the world, he does think that the other lords are hypocrites, hiding behind their laws, but he doesn't feel any guilt or shame from the violence he does. So the end of the memory is they're at the village and they see the guards projecting the entrance of the catacombs. And Vittorio is disappointed. He doesn't want to shed any blood. So he leaves and commands Tarhos to find another way in. And that's the end of the second memory. And actually, I will keep going because it kind of ties the third memory in. Because memory 3 is Tarhos' reaction. And he's like, what? I should find another way? He's disgusted. He is upset. Like, why should we not just go slaughter them all? That would be the easiest way. Why should I have to go find another way so Vittorio can sleep at night, and entertain his ideas of like good and evil, right and wrong, what's noble and barbaric. And he talks about how Vittorio's fortune was probably secured with violence and slaughter, and it's justified by codes and laws. So Tarhos is disgusted with Vittorio and begins to hate Vittorio. And then he has the thought, Vittorio doesn't deserve these relics. He doesn't deserve to get these ancient relics and ancient knowledge, whether it opens a gateway or not. He believes Vittorio's a fool, and this paradise place Vittorio is dreaming of doesn't exist. He is so angry. He wants to crush Vittorio. He wants to crush all the lords he served. So basically, this command by Vittorio has just filled him up with hate. So he has decided he is going to take it all. He is going to get the stone. He's going to get all the relics that he can. And he'll show Vittorio the truth. So Vittorio has left. And Tarhos is going to go get this stone. And I'm just going to tie it into memory 4 because Vittorio has left. He's left 3 guards with Tarhos. And so this memory is really short. It's just him battling these 3 guards Vittorio left. And as you can guess, they all die. Mm-hmm. There's details of the fighting, but he kills them all and he is going to go to the catacombs of Sintra. So any thoughts?
He's an angry boy.
Yeah, he's very angry. He has authority issues.
Yeah. Obviously. Mommy issues?
It's a little.
Maybe?
The mom's going to come back a little bit when he talks to Vittorio.
Oh, nice.
But I wouldn't say mommy issues. I don't know. I think I think it's just like a kind of class authority issue, right?
Almost also like the world's unfair, so I'm going to be unfair as well.
Yeah. It's like it's already evil. What am I?
Yeah, it's already evil.
Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah. I think he just has this mentality of violence is part of life.
Yeah.
And so why should I spare these guards? Like, you want this stone, right? Like, what's killing a few people gonna matter.
Get what you want.
Yeah. So our next memory is him getting to the catacombs. The guards are there. They see Tarhos, and they're scared. Tarhos apparently is 6'6", so he's a big
Whew.
dude.
Yeah.
He's
Ooh.
very big. And remember, one of his faithful 3 is also as big. He's imposing, obviously, but they don't run off. They draw their weapons. They're going to give a fight. So Taro starts fighting the guards. It talks about how time slows down. I feel like it's like a, excuse me, like an action movie, like that slow motion fighting.
Slow motion action
Yeah, it
sequence.
says like time slows to crawl as he fights through the guards, but his sword is in constant motion. He's severing limbs, slicing through them.
Cool.
Yeah. So, he's cutting through them. He is very, very skilled. And so once he starts getting through a lot of them, some of the guards start running for their lives. They're screaming for mercy, and Taros just strikes them down. And then he goes to the Ancient One door. It says he wipes the blood off his blade and then picks up one of the torches and steps into the catacombs, into the darkness. So then we move on to the next memory, is him going inside, and he feels death surrounding him. It fills his nostrils, but it's not the decomposing flesh of those that have been buried, but it's the rotting bodies of rodents and vermin that are all in the catacombs. And so he's using the torch to illuminate the walls. He sees that the walls are constructed with stone, and there's also skulls and bones arranged in ornate displays. He says he feels the presence of the countless lost and terrified souls that are in this catacombs, and he thinks them all cowards.
Oh,
and
Harsh.
basically, this next part, we get very Indiana Jones, okay?
Ooh.
For some reason, we go very Indiana Jones.
Okay.
He looks to the wall, and there's a skeleton impaled by a spear from like a wall trap. So basically, these catacombs are trapped up. Okay.
Nice.
Booby trapped.
And he finds remains of other dead adventurers. There's a pit filled with spikes. There are people crushed by boulders. Other victims torn in half by swinging blades. But while he's going through these catacombs, he feels a presence guiding him. It's dark and cold and primal. And as he's going through, a paving stone he steps on clicks, and razor-sharp blades swing from the wall in a deadly arc, and he drops to his knees, and the blades whiz above him, and he narrowly avoided being decapitated. Yeah. Basically. And then he's going through with his torch. Keep going. And there's spiders.
Sean Connery pops up.
Yeah.
I wish. Oh, but he talks about a lot of spiders. This comes up later too. And the spider webs are sticking to him. It's very sticky. And these are like massive furry spiders, and they're all over his armor, and they're trying to get into his armor, but they can't, I guess, luckily for him. He gets to another cavern, and there's a bunch of bats, and of course him entering scares them all, and they start screeching and flapping and slamming into them, so much that they nearly knock him off his feet. Sweat's getting in his eyes, but he's going to forge ahead. But then a trapdoor drops beneath his feet, and he falls, but he grabs the edge just in time. He's barely holding on. The weight of his armor is so heavy, but he uses every ounce of his strength to lift himself out. And after that, he finds a narrow path to an ancient and ornate sepulchre, and he pushes, it says he strains and pushes to move the ledger stone that's there that covers it. And it opens up, and he finds the skeleton of an ancient warrior. The metal of his armor is tarnished but not rusted, but there's a large stone talisman laying against the breastplate. and it's the lapis paradisus. So what do y'all think of that part?
That's it. He has like no fear. It's just like everyone who died here, y'all suck. And he just keeps moving forward. I definitely think that starting from a very young age, the entity has had a stake in his life.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, it
Like
sounds
the
like it's
entity
here.
wants him. Yeah, the entity wants him to go find this. It's kind of what it sounds like. But very Indiana Jones,
Mm-hmm.
for sure.
I think somebody might have watched Indiana Jones before they wrote this lore.
Hmm.
But I was expecting, like, to be this old knight waiting for you to pick the Holy Grail. But yeah, I do feel like it's definitely he's like on a one man mission to like find this thing.
Hmm.
I don't know how accurate this would have been for the time. Because I didn't mention this at the beginning, so this is 14th century. We'll find out some years when we get to Victorio. Um, but yeah, I don't know how accurate this would have happened, that they'd have a catacomb with this many traps, but yeah, it's very Indiana Jones. So moving on, our next memory is he has to get back out. He retraces his steps. His torch goes out and he's in complete darkness, but he feels his way ahead. He gets past all the obstacles. He avoids the pits, the blades, the spiders, everything getting back out. But once he gets out, he has a new burst of energy, right? He survived. There's a few guards that have come, but he slices through them. He gets his horse and he sets off in the dark. And he returns to camp. And when he gets there, he finds dozens of warriors and knights waiting to make him pay for his dishonor. And they start attacking him. And he evades their blows. And while he feels tired, right? He's got to be tired after going through the catacombs. He knows there is something else working in him. There is this. He says he's a vessel for darkness. So it's not just, he acknowledges that it's not just himself defeating all these guys. There's something else at work. And that is giving him the strength and the skill to fight through all these knights. So he is fighting through them. And Vittorio is here, obviously. He shows up and he screams for everything to stop. And Tarhos holds up the lapis paradisus. And Victoria's eyes grow wide as he takes in the symbols. And he tells Vittorio, if you want it, you must take it. Bend your knee or face my sword. So, of course, Vittorio is not for violence. He orders his men to put their swords down. He doesn't want any more slaughter. And so they all bend their knee, and Tarhos takes Vittorio prisoner. So,
Dang.
yeah, sad. But here we also get more of maybe the entity at work.
And just the fact that Tarhos obviously is just a badass warrior.
Oh,
To
hell
be
yeah.
able to do all that, like, you would think you'd want somebody like him on your side, but apparently he's just so corrupted at this point.
Yeah.
But he's like OP warrior right there.
Yes, because he did earn his freedom
with
his bravery and his skills. It also mentions in the base lore like he's smart, so he's kind of like got everything all around.
It's like the full knight package. Except he thirsts for your blood.
Yeah, except for the evilness part and the dark presence.
I mean, if I was a damsel in distress,
I mean, 6'6".
I would totally love him to save me, but I don't know what he's gonna ask for in return.
I was gonna say he fits like the the embodiment of a bodice ripper, but who knows what he would do to you after that?
He sounds like he's just too into like fighting. Other than like his trio that he saves, he's not really interested in anybody else.
I think he just wants to take what he wants.
Yeah.
Next memory is Tarhos entering the dungeon that Vittorio is staying in. Remember, we're in Vittorio's dungeon, his palace, and Vittorio's on the ground, and there's all these decomposing limbs and heads around him in the dungeon. And Tarhos has brought down this dripping basket. So Vittorio opens his eyes and looks at him, and Tarhos pulls out a head out of the basket and asks Vittorio what his name is. And it's Cavallari. I believe I'm saying that right. And so Tarhos puts the head down on the floor in a pile with all the other ones. The eyes are open and staring at Vittorio. And then he pulls out another head. This one, his name was Arno. And Tarhos calls him a coward and that you should have heard him beg.
Oh, wow.
And then he pulls out 2 more heads and places them so they're all staring at Vittorio, the eyes open. And then he pulls out the last head and he holds it up and he looks at it and says, I liked him. He didn't beg. I think I'll keep this one. And Tarhos takes that head back and puts it in the basket. And he stares at Vittorio a long time, but then he exits the dungeon and he leaves Vittorio with all those heads to keep him company. And hopefully this will jar him into telling him about the lapis paradisus and the symbols. So this is just part of the torture that Tarhos is doing on Vittorio.
He's trying to break Vittorio.
The next memory falls in line with that too. He goes down to the dungeon, but he doesn't open the door, so he's just looking at Vittorio. And through the small opening, he sees that Vittorio's lying on the ground with the maggots. There's flies, making it difficult to see.
Ooh.
And he says, I would have thought you would have crushed the maggots by now rather than live with them. And Vittorio slowly opens his eyes, but he doesn't give a response. And Tara starts telling him that the neighboring lords are about to attack him. And he goes, why? Because I'm doing what they do, only without the lies. But they say I'm mad. So basically he's kind of having this conversation with Vittorio, but really kind of with himself a bit. He asks Vittorio, do I seem mad to you? Life is madness, and I accept it for what it is, and so perhaps in the way I am mad. And now he opens the door and enters, and he starts crushing the maggots as he paces on into the dungeon. And Taro starts telling him the story about a village. He says, I remember a village we destroyed because a man had stolen food from a noble. The entire village in ruins. And everyone hacked to pieces because of a few stolen apples. And there was so much suffering and death because of one man's hunger and another man's ego. He says, that's the history of the world right there. But Vittorio still says nothing in return. And Charles goes on that he doesn't mind the killing, but I did mind the praise and honors we were given for our just and pious deeds. That kind of talk is true madness. And so he pushes through the flies to approach Vittorio, and he sees that Vittorio has scratched symbols on the floor. And Charles just laughs at him. Then our next memory, this is our last one. Last memory. Charles enters the dungeon again and goes to Vittorio and hands him some water. And Vittorio does drink. And he sees more symbols are carved into the ground. Charles starts boasting, you should see what I've done to the town. I've made similar symbols on the bodies. I've recently added old rivals to my rather impressive displays. Probably talking about maybe the Campania, or I'm sorry, Guardia Campania. And he talks about, I have old friends helping me prepare to battle a small army closing in from us in every direction. Then he goes on and says, but something tells me they aren't coming for me. From what I've heard, a few nobles desire what you've been hiding from me, which makes me wonder, what exactly have you been hiding? And he says, I offered the nobles the stone, but that didn't interest them in the least. So what knowledge do you have that's so special? So Taros uses his foot to wipe away some of the maggots and reveals the symbol. Not this knowledge of the perfect world. And Taros goes on and tells him, what you don't understand is all your wisdom is that the world is perfect as it is. It is, and if you don't get it here and now, it doesn't matter where you end up or what knowledge you find, you'll always be looking for something more. And he goes on. This is all of kind of Taros's ideology right here. Paradise will come when you make peace with life as it is and not the way you imagine it should be, when you embrace the horror instead of running from it. Only when you can do this, you will see the madness of your ways and your futile search for knowledge, your foolish refusal to take a life, even the life of a groveling maggot. And Taros starts crushing more of the maggots on the ground. And then he starts remembering. There was a village quite far from here. A small army advanced on this village on a mission, I suppose, to butcher the barbarians, to make this world a better place. Rather than be killed by a stranger or to be taken as a slave, these villagers had chosen to die by their own accord. I remember one mother had poisoned her family without hesitation or remorse. The love and strength of will it must have taken to do that is something I've yet to see in all my experiences on the battlefield and off. I have been around nobles and knights my whole life, and all I've seen is cowardice steeped in the rotten stew of lies and hypocrisy. And he says, I have yet to meet her equal. And he leaves Vittorio in the darkness.
Whoa.
And that is the end of the Knight's lore. So any thoughts now that we've gone through all of his memories?
I'm thinking.
You think?
Yeah, I mean that's a lot to take in. I mean, I knew his base lore, and I knew some of his ideals from that, but he's got some deep convictions that he holds, and they're just unwavering. Yeah, I don't want to meet him in a dark alley. That's for sure.
No.
I mean, I don't know if it's okay to say, but I kind of think it's cool that he's trying to find. Well, it seems like he's trying to replicate what the mother did. Like he's trying to find that bravery and that sacrifice. And it's like nobody matches up to that because you kind of can't. Like you can't. A mother's love sometimes is like so powerful.
Yeah.
And it's hard to replicate. And I think it's kind of a cool ending for that. Like, well, I'm never gonna find it. And it's like, well, I mean, you could try, but it's gonna be hard.
Well, should we move on to Vittorio Toscano?
Oh, yes, Daddy Vittorio.
Yes.
Okay. So luckily for us, Vittorio's tome lore goes after his base lore. So it's all going to be chronological. Okay. So we will start with his base lore. Vittorio Toscano was born in 1343. So thank you, Behavior, for giving us some years.
I know, a year. Unlike all the other
So we know that
ones.
like the Knight Vittorio is this the same time frame. So we don't have Taros's birth year, but probably somewhere around the same time as Vittorio.
Yeah,
maybe
a bit,
if they're close in age.
If they're close in age, or maybe Taros could be later if he's younger than Vittorio. But anyways, we're still talking 14th century. So Vittorio was born in 1343. He's the youngest of three, and so he's third in line to inherit his family's land. He was born to Alberto and Caterina Toscano, or his parents' name. So at age 15, his dad sent him to train to be a knight with his older brothers and learn all the military stuff. But Vittorio wasn't having it. He was not interested in combat. He was more of a student of philosophy, and he believed physical violence was bad. It should be the last resort. The person he was training under, Ettore Fabrizio, I believe I'm saying that right. He was teaching Vittorio and his brothers, and he was basically fed up with Vittorio not wanting to fight. And so he orders one of his pages to attack Vittorio, and Vittorio dodges and blocks the blows. But he refuses to fight back. He's just like dodging. And this makes his opponent very angry. And so in one of the attacks, the attacker trips and he falls on his own dagger and he bleeds out in less than a minute. And Vittorio, this upset him so much, he threw down his sword and he swore to never pick it up again. Since Vittorio, obviously, not going to fight, his dad sends him off to his uncle Renzo. His uncle Renzo's the Duke of Portoscuro, and he is a scholar and he collects rare artifacts. So under Renzo, Vittorio studies lost civilizations, ancient history. He's researching forgotten tomes. He's an expert in philosophy, and he's finding out about ancient secret societies. And he's finding out about these guardians of knowledge, and he finds that they're present in almost every century and culture. And these guardians went by different names depending on the time and region they were in. They were said to be from a different dimension. Some of the names they went by were watchers, keepers, guides, masters, and observers.
Oh, heard that before.
So with this research, he's revealed that these guardians are gatekeepers of advanced knowledge that will help humanity. And his theory is that the observers are waiting for humanity to acquire wisdom before releasing this knowledge, because it could lead to self-destruction. Vittorio and his uncle Renzo are basically on the same page that greed for money and power is the source of conflict. They're of the same mind. So Vittorio urges Renzo to mount an expedition to find lost relics and artifacts from different runes. And so they go around and find different artifacts. But then they find out about a tale of a mysterious artifact that's split into 3 and is scattered across the world. And the first place they go to is the ruins of Troy. And they find one piece. They find a second piece at the Isle of Rhodes. And they find the third piece at Delphi under the Temple of Apollo. And when they're at this location, they also find an altar that shows a map of Crete with a star over it. Where they need to go is the Palace of Minos. They go there, and they put the 3 relics, and there's this ancient machinery that comes to life. A stone wall slides open, revealing a hidden vault. And when they go inside, they find a white marble wall that's inscribed with form of Sanskrit. And the message that's on this wall is a warning about a cult that is sought to corrupt humanity with knowledge isn't ready for. And this cult is hunting down the observers and imprisoning them. But before they could be imprisoned, the observers have hidden artifacts around the world. And also on this wall is a message about a special stone that holds the secret of traveling between planes of existence. And Vittorio believes this stone is the key to finding the observers and their perfect world. The stone is called the Lapis Paradisus. As they exit this vault, Uncle Renzo unfortunately steps on the black serpent and bites him. And the venom is spreading fast, and Renzo passes away in minutes. Now, Vittorio is Renzo's only heir, so Vittorio has now inherited all of his uncle's things and his wealth and his fortune. And he is determined to honor his uncle and to help in humanity get beyond weakness and greed and violence. So now Vittorio is determined to find the Lapis Paradisus. In 1391, Vittorio starts his expedition. This would make him 48 years old. He employs a mercenary knight to aid his effort and offer protection. This knight is from the Guardia Campania, and it's Tarhos Kovacs, our knight.
I'm just kidding.
Vittorio describes him that he feared no man or beast. Through their explorations, they get to Sintra that we've talked about in the Knight's Lore, the catacombs. But it's guarded. And of course, Vittorio, no bloodshed. And he tells Tarhos he has to find another way. But Tarhos defies Vittorio, and by the end of the day, has him in irons. And so they return to Italy, and Tarhos has locked Vittorio in his own dungeon and is torturing and killing because he wants to find out the meaning behind the stone. Within weeks, Tarhos has grown tired of torturing the townsfolk, and Vittorio is left to rot in the dungeon. So in his solitude, he starts scratching symbols from the lapis paradises on the stone floor. He's trying different sequences, just hoping he can get to this world of paradise, right? They can get out of the situation. And as he was about to surrender to hunger and despair, he tries one last sequence, thinking about this world of peace. And he thinks he's failed. And he's waiting for the rats to just come in and take him, right? But then he feels a cold, unnatural black fog rise from the stone floor. In moments, he hears cries of anguish and crows circling above him. And he gets to his feet, and he finds himself in another world. But it's not the paradise he had hoped for. And that's the base lore for Vittorio.
Dang. So basically, he opened up a door into the entity's realm.
Oops.
Oops. I mean,
He did not find paradise.
Well, I
Yeah.
don't know if he actually used the symbols. I don't know. We'll get to it in the tome lore. I'm on the fence if he actually did it or if it was all the entity.
Well, I will say that I can see how we have opposites. Like we have foils for, Vittorio and Tarhos, as they both have very strong convictions,
Mm-hmm.
but they're opposite.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. There's extreme opposites. Because, like, Vittoria's
Extreme
like,
opposites.
throw down my sword. I'm done. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah. Like he wants to solve world peace. He wants to find world peace.
But he also he didn't ask for his uncle's money. He just inherited it. Like and he was trying to use it to do good things. Whereas
yeah, for sure.
Tarhos is like, well, you don't deserve that at all. And he's kind of putting him in the category of other lords, which to him are corrupted because he's probably seen corruption among the other lords.
Yeah.
So I find that interesting that they both have extremely strong convictions. They're just definitely opposite in the spectrum.
Yeah, for sure.
So what's in his tome?
His tome. So his tome takes place after he gets pulled into the fog. And it's pretty interesting. It gets a little out there. So I'm interested to see what y'all think of it. And I did try to find like someone's interpretation. I was curious what people thought of it, but I haven't really seen any videos or anything like going over his tome lore. So this is all us.
Oh, let's go.
Because there was some stuff I was kind of like, I wonder about that. So at first, Vittorio cannot see through the black fog that's around him, but he knows he's falling. He can't tell if he's spinning, but he's just thinking about those symbols he scratched on the floor. They worked. So he's now free. And so then he talks about the spinning. He does feel spinning and it's intensifying. He's starting to feel sick. He clenches his jaw. It says he clenches his jaw, but at last his mouth is forced open and from his lips spews black fog. It dances around him.
Oh.
It's tangled in his dirty hair. It's twisting around him. He calls it this darkness, this foul miracle is within him as well. And he says it's fascinating sensation, and he doesn't resist it. He wants to give himself over to it, but he doesn't. He remembers who he is. He remembers that he's Vittorio Toscano, the Lord of Portoscuro, and that he's seeking the great observers who live beyond the existence, and he wants to know all they know. So the free fall stops, and he's on solid ground, and the last of the fog escapes his mouth, and the fog lifts, and he's standing in a village, much smaller than his home, and it's not, of course, the paradise he read about. But he says, of course, the pursuit of knowledge is never so easy, that this is just the beginning of his journey, and he has not lost himself yet. That is the first memory. I don't know if you want me to break it up or just keep going all together.
I think just keep going.
Let's go. Yeah, this one flows together. So Victoria's exploring this village. The stench is so bad, it's making his eyes water. He's wondering about what this village is. The street is made of sand, not stone. And basically everything's abandoned. It's in ruin. But he sees a sign of life at the lodging house. There's a huddled mass shivering in the entryway. And he goes up to, he assumes person, says, "Excuse me, tell me, what place is this?" And this mass raises its head, but all he sees is a void. And this mass says to him, "You wonder about the smell. I smell it too. What does it smell like to you?" And Vittorio knows the answer to the question, and he says her question, so female voice, to her question, but doesn't dare say it. So he starts backing away, and she falls to Vittorio's feet, grabbing his ankles. "Don't go. He knew you were coming. He told me to keep you as long as I could." And then arms come from behind him and grab him around the chest and throw him against the wall. And Vittorio feels the whole lodging house shudder from the impact, and he falls to the floor. The building crackles around him, and the attacker straddles Vittorio and pulls something from beneath his robe. And Vittorio goes like, "I'm unarmed. I have nothing." But this robed man doesn't listen. And in his hand is a mechanical nightmare, some sort of torture device from another world. And Vittorio bats at the man, but Vittorio's very weak from being held captive. He's hungry. He doesn't have the strength to fight him off. So beams of wood are starting to fall from the ceiling, and the robed man rips open Vittorio's shirt, and he buries the device into Vittorio's chest. And Vittorio screams, and an unnatural drone fills his ears. And dust is falling all around him, stinging his eyes from the building. It's collapsing. So Vittorio knows he has to do something fast, so he digs his nails into the soft wooden floor and carves some of the symbols. And after he does that, the world changes around him. The robed man looked up at the falling beam, and then he was gone. And Vittorio no longer saw the woman. And Vittorio just thinks, man, what violence. Why are they, attacking him? And he starts talking about how violence is a form of madness. It's a symptom of illness that most could not overcome. And he even mentions the knight couldn't overcome his the allure of violence. When he stops thinking about all that just happened, he hears leaves blowing. There's trees above him, and he realizes he's in a forest. And Vittorio rises, and then the pain shoots through his chest. And he remembers what happened to him with the instrument. And he thinks, oh, he must have injected me with some poison. So he opens up his ripped shirt, and he looks at the marks above his breast. And he realizes he was not stabbed or injected with anything. The robed man had drawn on him. And Vittorio remembers reading of the Celts and their methods of creating permanent art on their bodies, which we know And Vittorio remembered a word as a tattoo. But he's confused, right? Why would the attacker do this? Like, draw on him. And as he looks down, he notices they're incomplete because the lodging house had collapsed. The attacker didn't finish drawing the symbols. Yeah. He's looking to them, and they look very similar to the ones he's been drawing. So he starts copying them in the dirt, and then he feels a breeze. Nothing happens when he draws the symbols in the dirt. So he realizes, well, I need to get something to eat, right? He's been held captive for so long. He's hungry. He couldn't even fight off the attacker. So he gets up. He finds some leaves and berries to eat. They're not the best. He needs more. He's hoping maybe in a different realm he can find some food. So he stops and he does some more symbols. He's going to draw some symbols in the dirt. And he starts hearing screaming. And he starts running towards the sound. Now, logically, he knows he probably shouldn't. Like, he's not really in the state to, like, help anyone or do anything about it. But these screams are different for him. They sound like the screams he was hearing at home. And so these screams are in his mind. He knows these voices. He nearly, like, trips and falls running towards it. And these screams are the screams are exactly the same as he heard back home. The screams of the people of Portoscuro, the people that Tarhos had tortured. And he makes it to a clearing, and he passes, and the screaming lingers at his back. So he returns to the clearing and looks down. And he's like, what is this at my feet? What is this illusion? There's a baby bird. Maybe it's fallen from its nest. But the bird opens its beak, and the screams are coming from it.
Oh.
So Vittorio kneels next to it and picks up the bird in his hands, and he studies it. It's small. And part of him's thinking, there's some meat on this bird. I could eat it. But it screams again. It stops, but then it'll stop screaming when it closes its mouth. He starts pretty much fantasizing about eating this bird. And if he just pinches the neck, the screams would stop. And then I could eat it, right? And his hands are trembling, like he's really, really gonna maybe do it. But he stops himself. He was about to give in to the madness, the hunger. And he's like, I was just about to kill this little bird. Like, what's wrong with me? He's like, I won't lose myself. So he relaxes his grip, and the bird sinks its beak into the palm of his hand. And Vittorio tries to drop the bird, but it just hangs from his hand. It's tearing his skin. It's drinking his blood like a leech. Oh. At last, he grabs it and throws it into the forest. And then a grown beast returns in a bellow of red and black fog. A charging behemoth with wings that are cutting through the trees, and the beak is dripping with blood. So there's nowhere to hide, and the beast is moving towards him. So Vittorio runs down the path. His legs are shaking. He figures out a plan. He's going to keep going. But behind him, he feels the beast right behind him. It's snapping at him. He feels his clothes tearing. He feels blood dripping down his back. And he turns the corner moments further the beast, and he sees his plan, what he's going to do. He's avoiding all the brush, all the thorny bushes, but the beast is so big in size and weight, it cannot stop itself from falling into this pit. So Vittorio dodges him, and the bird falls in. And Vittorio hears the sound of bones cracking and the bird shrinking. And apparently this reminds Vittorio of his horse, Dominicio. For some reason, he mentions his horse. But the beast is withering in the pit, clawing at the edges, and unable to get out. So Vittorio sits there, he eats some more leaves, and he stares at the beast. And of course, this beast is not happy with him. But the search for the observer has to keep going. So Vittorio grabs a stick and carves the symbols in the dirt at his feet and leaves the beast behind. So now Vittorio's somewhere new realm, and he starts crying. So it says he starts weeping because he has jumped to this place. There's fruits and vegetables, but everything is wilted and dead. Dried meat is hanging from this curing as it hangs from the ceiling. But basically, like, everything's gone bad. There's butter in an empty icebox. There's wheels of cheese on the shelf. He's able to ignore the rotting, fruits and veggies, and he gets the meat and the cheese, and he's able to eat finally. So he's more weeping for joy that he has now found some food. So yeah, he finds food. He uses the water. There's water there he can use to wash his hands, and the water's clear, so yay, he can hopefully drink. He cleans up. He pulls off his shirt, right? He's got to, taken his injuries from the bird. And he looks at his chest, right? Where he had the little tattoo. And it's grown. There's more symbols. There's more markings. It's spreading outward. So the tattoos kind of distracted him. So he forgets about cleaning the injuries on his back. And he studies these new tattoos. And they look familiar. And so he's trying to recall what they are from his studies. And he recognizes some of the runes that are still growing. Let's see. Next, he's trying to open the door to where he teleported into the storehouse, but it's locked, so he can't really get out. So no problem. He's going to draw some more symbols on the floor with some jelly, and he's just hoping his next destination is as good as this one. He finds himself in a dimly lit room with the floor and the walls are dirt, so he figures out he is underground. Dirt's falling above him as the ground shakes, and he can hear a loud explosion. He's like, I can't stay here. Like, he's shivering. He needs some new clothes. So luckily, in searching around, he does find some clothes. Some are leather, some are cloth. So the outfit's too big, but it keeps him warm. And so he hears another explosion and more dirt's coming down. He starts to, he's thinking, I need to leave. So he starts to draw the symbols again. And he realizes he's not alone. And the voice behind him says, put your hands above your head now. The voice is coarse, and of course, Vittorio obeys the voice, right? What else is he going to do? The voice tells him to turn and to face him, and Vittorio does, and he finds himself before a feathered soldier in red and black, with a pronounced beak and eyes of screaming gold. And he's carrying a weapon that Vittorio has not seen before. And so Victoria's like, what are you? Though Victoria already knows the answer. It reminds him of the bird beast that he left, right? The red and the black. And it looks like the soldier is aligned with that beast. So the soldier is soon joined by other soldiers of his kind, and they lead Vittorio down a narrow hallway. They push him forward to a staircase to an open door in the ceiling, and they go to the surface. And there's still explosions going on. There's a battle in the distance, and the soldiers are corralling other humans into cages and carts as prisoners. And so Vittorio is very sad because he's a prisoner again. But then he hears the familiar screech ringing through the air, and the soldiers stop. They drop to their knees and look up at the large winged behemoth with its red and black feathers. Its legs, so it's healed up from its fall. Talks about how its leg is healed, but it's twisted and it's soaring overhead. So Vittorio's hands are bound behind him. The prisoners are screaming nearby, and Vittorio's trying to ignore them. He's trying to stretch the rope. He's trying to stretch his arms and kind of test how far he can go with the rope and if he can break it. And he thinks, I will carve the symbols into the palm of my hand if I have to escape. And so the soldiers bark a command, and one of the prisoners starts screaming very loudly. Vittorio's just thinking, don't look, focus on the rope. His hands, his eyes are turned downwards, but he can feel the bird land. And so he's trying not to look, but he sees the neck of the bird go down, and the screaming prisoner is gone. And the big bird gulps the prisoner down.
Oh.
Now Victoria's thinking, I should have killed it when I had the chance. I should have killed the little bird when I had the chance, and then none of this would have happened, right? How many have died because of my mistakes? He's thinking on that, and then something snaps. His hands fall to his sides, and it's like, how did the rope come loose? Well, the bird is above him now, looking down at him, and the other prisoners are gone. Only he remains. And Vittorio looks up at his old nemesis, and his instinct is to run, to carve the symbols into the dirt and escape. But why? He says, let there be one last death so that no one else needs to suffer from my mistakes. And the behemoth plunges his head down, and all is dark and silent. There's a voice. It's you. I remember you from long ago. So Vittorio wakes to a kind face looking down at him, and it's familiar. She was the one that was the void that he met when he first entered. But she's now is something else. Yes, I remember. I was here once. And Vittorio sits up and brushes the debris from his legs. It's the collapsed staircase, the fallen ceiling. What was this? The lodging house. She brushes his face with her twisted fingers. It's like, what's going on? I was devoured, consumed. And she goes, yes, as was I. He can feel her pity. The winged demon is a creature of the abyss. It feasts on worlds. Although I hear on the wind there are creatures even stronger than it, with greater appetites. And the room shudders. So Victoria's like, I must get out of here. I must get outside. And he's on his feet. He's reaching for the door, but he can't open it. He can't move it. And the woman comes up and says, here, let me. And the woman puts a gentle hand on the door, and it obeys. But there is no outside on the other side of the door. Memories start stirring up in Vittorio. He's thinking of the place, the storehouse where all the rotting fruit and vegetables, the meat, and the cheese. And he goes, I was hungry. I gorged myself in this larder. Why is it here? Another realm devoured. She holds the rotting food. Vittorio rests against the wall. What is done is done. There is no escape. And what is this? The woman runs her hand over his tunic. It is open and off his shoulders in swift motion, and her hands touch his chest, his arms, the markings. And Vittorio looks down and sees how much the tattoos have grown. They extend across his torso and his arms. And so the woman's walking around him, looking at all the markings. The man in the robe, he planted the seed in your chest, how long it has taken to grow. So Vittorio puts his shirt back on. My attacker, is he here? And she goes, no, he left me shortly after you did. He left a note. Perhaps he knew you'd return for it when the time was right. And she hands him a roll of papyrus. No greetings on the page, And it's not a message he can understand. It's only more symbols. And he didn't even finish writing it. It's incomplete.
Rude.
Yeah. So, but that word incomplete awakens something in Vittorio, a memory. The tattoo the attacker left on him, the symbols he used on him, they were also incomplete. So the blood on his fingers is dry from trying to get the ropes off. And he basically picks up the scabs to create some new red ink. And he drags his finger along the papyrus, drawing the C that was planted in his chest. The message is a puzzle to be solved, and that first tattoo is the missing piece. The room starts shimmering around him, and in his mind's eye, he sees a place far away. A menacing hook hanging from a stand. The man in the robe reaching out, urging him onward. So, Vittorio paces, and he has this revelation that the man that his attacker was an observer. So basically, by him getting the tattoo, he was chosen with the knowledge from the observers. And so the woman's still here watching Vittorio as he paces. And he finds a knife in a drawer. He decides, my journey must go on. The observer chose me. I will get out of here. I'll find his realm. I need to copy his mark. So the papyrus was in his hand. The papyrus that was in his hands is now gone. He thinks he's losing his mind. He tries to remember the symbols, but they kind of fade like a waking dream. And he kind of laughs to himself, this bitter laugh. The pursuit of knowledge is never so easy. He decides that the old symbols are not going to do. They didn't really give him the power to travel as he needed to. They were taking him to random places. Somewhere on his body is a key to complete control over the travel across realms. So he starts to stand in front of a mirror and he studies the symbols that are on him. And he's having to study them. He knows he has to pick carefully what he's going to do. So if he chooses incorrectly, it could be his end. But then he sees it. A familiar swirls and circles he has used so far. The symbols for traveling between the random realms. But there are more. There's jagged lines and smaller shapes like accents around the symbols, modifying those symbols, changing the meaning. And so he has a moment of clarity that this is the key he's been looking for. So Vittorio drives the knife into the wall of the lodging house and begins to carve. And a scream vibrates through the room. Blood wells from the carvings and runs down the wall.
Ooh.
He realizes, I have never been violent before. Never in my life have I ever harmed anyone. I've never had to. He's had a life of privilege. But that life is behind me now, he says. So he runs the knife across the wall with precision, remembering every accent and nuance he never knew he needed before. And the wall shudders and the blood does not stop flowing. And the screaming intensifies. And Victoria feels the woman's lips by his ear. She says, the power is yours now, for now. And then she's gone. And then we pop to the sun setting over the hills, and there's the smell of sulfur. As Victoria opens his eyes and looks upon a simple wooden shack. And so he looks down and he realizes the ground is squishy between his feet, and he finds that he's standing on a mound of blood and red and black feathers. Between him and the shack lies the head of the behemoth. Blood is pooling from the base of its severed neck. So Vittorio is relieved. He lets out a cry of triumph. The creature is dead. And he thinks the observers wanted me to come here. The symbols in their completion brought me here to the shack. Is it a stepping stone to his own realm? He needs to know more. So he opens the door and finds a staircase descending into the earth. And the room at the bottom of the stairs is dark. It's too deep for any of the light from the sun to get down there. So Vittorio's feeling his way down until he can see the shape of a candlestick. The touch of his hands brings it to life, the flame dancing. So it's a self-lighting candle. Ingenious, he thinks. And so beneath layers of dust and cobwebs, he starts to recognize the steel machines and wooden boxes and jars of fluid that are down there. It's a workshop, as it was described in his research of the observers. It's all the knowledge on the shelves. And he thinks the observer chose me, and it is from here that I will follow him to his realm. And a book on the desk catches his eyes. There's symbols on the cover. The symbols from his chest. They're not identical, but they're close. And Vittorio brushes the dust off the book and is startled by the texture of the pages. Old, tough letter. Every single page is covered with tattooed symbols. But he drops the book and backs away from it. It's not normal pages. It's skin. Human skin bound the book. Tattooed skin just like his. And he's alone in his workshop, and he feels the vastness of the realms closing in on him. And that is the end of Vittorio's lore.
Dang, what a fever dream.
Oh, it's so metal. I love it.
Oh.
He's hopping all over the place. That's kind of crazy.
It's very crazy. And then there's a couple of like little tidbits I want to go over too, but let's talk about the tome lore. What did y'all think? It's kind of out there.
It almost sounds like, because it had mentioned that there were creatures worse than this behemoth. But it almost sounds like he defeated one.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of. But I'm also wondering if maybe that's like a call out to a killer we can see in the future. I know I mentioned birds. We do already have our beloved bird mommy in the game.
Well, and birds also play a role in the game too. The crows.
The crows play a big role in the game. But it sounds like there's some type of head crow that he like took out.
Yeah.
There's a head crow.
And that it eats realms. Like it which is crazy.
Which is what the entity does. The entity goes and corrupts realms and then like brings them in to themselves, or however they do it. Eats them, that was referred to. So it could be the entity in a different form as well. That's just like, I want to know who everyone is. I want to know like who tattooed him. I want to know about the woman.
Yeah.
You have allusions to like the shack and different buildings that could be on maps.
Yeah.
So that's all interesting.
That's why I was trying to find like more interpretation on was who attacked him. He seems to believe it's an observer.
Yeah.
And I will say this, you brought up the shack, which I hadn't thought about before, but a couple of tidbits I wanted to throw in there is the description of his perks. A couple of descriptions. So potential energy. Your arcane abilities have adapted to the entity's realm after centuries of wandering, granting you unprecedented control over its many devices. And then Fogwise's description is, in your countless years in the fog, you have seen it all, and when you are focused, you can remember most of it too. So both these descriptions allude to that Vittorio's been in the entity's realm for hundreds of years.
Well, he is date-wise on timeline. The survivor, I mean, as far as we know, because obviously all of the timey-wimey stuff, that's why we're doing this in timeline order. Doesn't mean he was there first, but if we're going date-wise, he has been there the longest.
Yeah.
And they're alluding to that him being there a long time.
Yeah.
Because he would be, by time period, the oldest survivor taken by the entity.
Yeah.
But I know you also talked about in the plague lore, I think you mentioned it, like about the void and like some
Mm-hmm.
survivors, they go, I guess, crazy, or they can't take it anymore, so they end up going into the void.
Mm-hmm.
And like Victorio is still in the entity's realm, even after hundreds of years
Mm-hmm.
of being there. Whether he's the first or not, just more, I wanted to point out, like, he's been there like a really long time,
Oh yeah.
and he is still there. He's still, because like in the tome lore, especially, it's he talks about like not losing himself, and I
Mm-hmm.
think it shows his resilience to not lose himself in the entity's realm
Mm-hmm.
and to still be the person that he is. So that's kind of why I wanted to bring that up. So,
And it was interesting about the void too, is because it sounds like maybe that's where he was, because the void is supposed to be one of the, I guess there's 8 sub-realms, and the void is one of them, and it's different than the entity, so it's like an offshoot, and it's like a limbo where the entity kind of discards broken survivors who have kind of like lost their hope and stuff like that. But
Mm.
it seems
I
it's
like that.
possible to escape it though. I'm thinking maybe he was there originally, and because of all his little symbols, he escaped it.
mm-hmm. The observers
But
helped him get out,
the
basically,
observers,
or
yeah,
gave him the
helped
key
him get
too.
out. Which would be interesting because I think according to lore, only 2 people who have escaped from the void were the Blight and Vigo.
Mm,
And so when you first mentioned like someone stabbing him, I thought maybe it was like the Blight stabbing him with the putrid serum,
mm-hmm.
Oh
because that was part of what helped Blight escape.
yeah.
And I could see him, like, I know it's like a tattoo, so it'd be interesting to see if it was like an actual observer and they're like, this will help you,
Mm-hmm.
or if it was someone else that we know has been there and escaped and managed to return.
Yeah.
And it seems lately the blight is tied up in a lot of people's lore too.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to know all the
I
things.
know. And it was interesting too
Well,
that the observer was waiting for him,
Yeah.
like knew he was coming. So,
Hmm.
do you have any thoughts, Morbid?
well, no, I was just gonna say it was interesting that in the one, I think it was in his tome lore, that they mention the observer this far back.
Mm-hmm.
Unless it was also mentioned in the plague, I can't remember now.
It wasn't mentioned the plague, but I knew that going forward, we were going to be using terms like entity and observer. So that's why I
Yeah,
wanted to introduce them then, which is good because now we're talking about it now,
yeah. It was
where,
just, it was
yeah,
kind of, yeah, like it was kind of cool. Like, hey, we recognize these terms now. Like, they're starting to pop up in lore. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
then the fact that the observers apparently go back so far. I mean, this is what, like 14th century almost. So,
Yeah, and
yeah,
then
it's interesting to see where they'll, like, or how it'll progress from here.
yeah. And it sounds like from Victoria's research in the base lore, it's like they've been around for like centuries, like before Victoria. So we really don't know how far back the
that
observers
can
go.
happen with timey-wimey stuff though, because who knows how
Exactly.
long?
Yeah.
Because it sounds like he was kind of realm jumping,
Yeah.
and I liked all the allusions to things we recognize, like the hooks, and then we have the shack, and then um, like he's seeing stuff. But I really would like to know like who the woman is,
Mm-hmm.
because it
Hmm.
sounded like at first that she was broken, and then all of a sudden he comes back and she seems fine. And if he is really being, because keep in mind with the entity, like for example, plague, thinking that she's going to entity because entity is her god, that the entity's really good at disguising themselves as a person or a thing you're
Mm-hmm.
looking for.
Hmm.
So, and you have to wonder if it was entity or if it really was some observer saying like, hey, now it's your time. But if they're saying, hey, now it's your time, then wouldn't they help him get out? Because the observers have like their own little sub realm where the observer is. It would just be, I don't know, I think it'd be awful. Like, I'm glad that he didn't give up faith. That's kind of where he would differ from the knight. But he's been in there a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's cool too that he can like teleport from realm to realm by using his runes and stuff. And maybe that kept him sane a little bit. I mean, they didn't all sound very great. I'm just saying.
No. But also,
Yeah.
this tome lore gives us an explanation for the shirtless cosmetics that came out when
There
he
you
came
go.
out. So there's a reason we
you.
have them.
It's my
Thank you,
favorite.
Tom.
Him all tattooed up. And it also explains, his weird clothes style too. If he's just
Mm-hmm.
hopping around finding clothes, it's interesting. And I like that you brought up his perks, because all the perks have little quotes that the survivors say. And I think it holds true for his, where he is just constantly trying to not fall under the influence of like the entity or the knight. So like he has his quick gambit perk where he keeps the killers, it talks about him keeping the killer's attention, like you know how to keep it, because he's been in there so long. But his little quote is, "We need not resort to violence, and I shall prove it." And then his Fogwise quote, where he can see the killer's aura, which you had talked about. He's been in the fog so long, he can be focused and he can remember things. Is, "I have seen great cruelty, and I've also seen another way." And then his other quote is, "When you look a layer deeper, you realize everything is connected," which is cool.
Yep.
So I really do think like just an hypothesis, that his lore backs up that he might be the first survivor.
I think so too.
I could see that because it sounds like what you mentioned, like Shack and
Hmm.
Hooks. It's not formed yet. The
Yeah,
entity, like the maps are not formed, the realm's not formed.
like
So,
it's coming together. His tattoos growing, because it sounds like it was like incomplete,
it just
and
keeps spreading.
it keeps spreading. I still love Daddy Vittorio, so.
Oh yeah, great cosmetics. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Silver
Uh,
Fox for sure.
Yep. That's it for our lore deep dive into the Knight and Victorio. Yeah, I'm hoping we'll see more explanation for Victorio. So I
Definitely.
was I was a little confused, but
I think he's interconnected with a lot of things because
yeah.
it mentioned cults, right? And we know
Mhm.
that there's a couple within this lore.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, for
Um,
sure.
he's just really interesting. And you had mentioned that when you were researching it, it was hard to find interpretations of other people's ideas for his tome lore.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if it's because, him and the knight didn't really get a warm welcome.
Oh yeah.
Maybe.
And I can understand because of the play style the knight introduced, which was our 3-gen meta. But I always thought his lore was so cool. Like their lore together was so cool, and
Yeah.
I feel like they were kind of gypped due to
Yeah,
people's
same.
reactions to gameplay mechanics.
Yeah.
So that could be why. But I really do think that Victorio, I just want to say, because I love him so much, that he was there from the beginning and he was the first one. And he saw everything developing into what it is today. Is what I want to happen.
It's canon now.
Yes, I spoke it into existence. It
Yeah.
is now
There you
canon.
hear
I
it's
agree though.
canon. I mean,
I
it makes
do.
sense.
I really do think it's canon. I think he's the first one that the entity took, and he's just had to navigate the whole thing
The whole
forever,
thing by
basically.
himself
Yeah.
until other people came.
Yeah.
I mean, it's possible that the person he met is a survivor too, or someone was part of the void or something
True.
like
I
that,
don't
which would be
know.
interesting to see who they are. Or it could have just been like a guide.
Yeah, maybe some kind of, I don't want to say entity lost because obviously it's entity, but
Yeah.
like some kind of soul that like got trapped maybe before the entity like perfected it.
Oh my God. It was a knight's mother.
Oh my
he
God!
found her.
Full circle. Boom.
Throwing that out there in case it comes true. We have her.
Right? If this is true, you heard it here first.
But yeah, I was mainly looking to try to see who the observer was and the woman was, if there were any theories, because I honestly have not deep dived into all of the DBD lore, and I know there's a lot in there, so I was like trying to see if anyone had like a guess on like, oh, in this cutscene in another tome there was this lady, or like something connected or not. But I guess we will see.
Yeah, maybe as we progress, we'll get some more information. But I really do feel like it was Victoria there as these realms were like forming
Yeah.
almost. Or the realm as we are going to come to know it is forming. And it's possible that he was in the void. Because we do know that right now, the person currently narrating for the Observer stuff is a female.
Good point.
So
they do change.
yeah,
Like there's just not one specific one.
Well, we had the same voice for a really long time, which was male.
Yeah.
And then when the Observer went missing, it switched to a female. So I do know that there's a female around there somewhere. And the hypothesis is that she's supposed to be the new Observer. But then I'd be like, well, then what are we going to do with Victorio if it was actually an Observer who tattooed him?
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know.
I secretly hope it was the Blight.
I don't know, but when I think of Blight, I just think of like his mooring and injecting, and then like
Yeah.
pus everywhere.
Yeah.
Because, well, we're gonna get to Blight eventually. I won't go off on a Blight tangent. We'll get to Blight, and maybe when we get to Blight, we can kind of see how he's connected to everyone else. Because he did, if I'm not mistaken, is very involved in the killers. Creating the killers. So
he's very involved with a lot of lore.
Yeah.
Because I can't think off the hand of anyone that tattoos.
No. More research required.
Yeah.
It will all come out as we go along.
I would say his tattoos on some of the cosmetics could look like the blighted serum. That's all I'm saying.
mean, facts.
Okay.
That was good. That was deep.
Yeah, I loved it.
I know, it was a lot.
Well, it's hard with
sorry I had to pause at some parts, but I was like, what's happening next?
You have to get your thoughts together. That's a lot to go through.
It is a lot.
I think it's a good summary.
But
it was hard too. Like these later ones they go so much more in depth than.
Oh my God.
They're long.
The beginning,
like even the base lore is long.
Yeah.
Like, I'm glad they're doing lore, but behavior, I don't know if we need like 12 pages of base lore sometimes. Like,
yeah, you
have like a tome that has 3 pages.
Yeah, like poor Meg.
Like
I know.
Paragraph.
Yeah.
And then you get like
originals, yeah.
Elodie's that's like 12 pages long. And
hers is exciting too.
Well, hers is really cool, but it's also like, oh wow, you guys really went in on this.
Well,
and then poor Meg's like,
that's when they get into the cults and stuff too.
Yeah, and Elodie's is connected to other people. And then you have like Hattie, who's got a connection to a lot of things. But it sounds like Vittorio may have been like the survivor that is at least currently, because we know that there's some survivors who have escaped, but the survivor that is at least currently one of the ones that started it all is what it sounds like.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see what they do with them. I hope we get more connections, and maybe as we're go through and reading, maybe we'll find some connections that we can make. So I'm super excited. Yes. Okay. Love you, Daddy Vittorio.
Yes. Knight, not so much. Sorry. I mean, your lore was somewhat interesting.
Your lore is cool. The meta that you introduced, we don't.
Yeah, the 3-gen kick meta was not fun.
It only got worse with Lady Voldemort.
Which luckily we don't have to do her lore for a really long time, and
Yeah,
I
for
I
real.
would just dissect it and like tear it apart. But anyway, I think that's it
We'll get
for
there.
our
Yeah.
Knight Victorio episode. Hope y'all enjoyed it. This was kind of a long one because we did 2 people.
Yeah.
But we had to, and we're gonna probably have to do that a lot for some of
Because some of
the
them
newer
are
lore.
so interconnected.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, well, I guess let's sign off. I'm Mockingbird.
I'm Morbid Plum.
And I'm Queen MG.
Yep. And so, good night. Goodbye. Good. You do it, Amanda. How do you?
Oh, I do?
Yeah, how you do it? Queen. Sorry, I said your real name.
Okay, let me think. It's been a while. We took a little break. I went on vacation. I think I say something like, I hope you have a good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.